Hello and welcome. Please take a seat, get cozy and enjoy a cup of terror with me, Stephanie Valentine. Now before I start, a little disclaimer. This is a true crime video and I will be talking about a murder and an execution and discussing a few details, some of which are a little gruesome. So hello my spooky little pumpkins. I'm so excited. It's nearly Halloween. So we are at this lovely old pub that's near me. Huge shout out to Matt for letting me use this place and film in here. We have a fire, we have a pumpkin, we have tea, and I have some more Victorian true crime for you. So let's get into it. A love triangle between a Swiss woman, an Irishman and an Englishman. It sounds like the start of a joke, but this was no laughing matter. This was a love triangle that ended in murder and became one of Victorian Britain's most infamous murder cases. It became known as the Bermondsey Horror. Marie Manning was born Marie de Roux in the Swiss city of Lausanne in 1821. She moved to England in her late teens and began work as a lady's maid to the wealthy Lady Blantyre in Stafford House, one of the grandest homes in London. A lady's maid was a sort of job you would ideally want if you were entering domestic service. It was a much higher position than a scullery maid or a laundry maid, and it was a nicer job. Due to being surrounded by wealth and luxury, Marie developed a taste for the finer things in life. She became obsessed with the idea of wealth and luxury, and she dreaded the thought of ever living a life of poverty. Marie had no shortage of admirers. She was said to be charismatic, good-looking, with a magnetic personality. In 1846, she met Patrick O'Connor, an Irishman who was working as a customs officer. He was around 50 years old when she met him. She met Patrick on a boat to Boulogne with Lady Blantyre. As well as being a customs officer, he was also a bit of a shady moneylender who charged a huge amount of interest and, as a result, had made a lot of money and had become very wealthy. Marie was very taken with Patrick, and he promised her that he would take her out for a meal when he returned to London. In early 1847, he made good on his promise. Patrick wasn't the only gentleman that Marie was seeing, though. She was already in a relationship with a Frederick George Manning, who was a guard on the Great Western Railway. Frederick was also a bit of a shady character. He seems to have been fired from his railway job because he was suspected of being involved in some robberies. So both men were very taken with the Swiss maid, and they both proposed marriage to her over the next couple of weeks. She was very torn, though, as to whose proposal to accept. She also had to work out who could provide her with the lifestyle that she had grown accustomed to. So on one hand, you had Patrick O'Connor. He was very wealthy, yes, but he was quite a lot older than her and he was a big drinker. Frederick was more her age, only a couple of years older than her, and he was easier to control and manipulate, but he didn't earn a lot of money. However, he told Marie that he was due to inherit a substantial fortune from his mother. Marie finally decided between the two men. She decided to marry Frederick, and on the 27th of May 1847 they married in St James's Church in Piccadilly. They settled into a home at 3 Minerva Place in Bermondsey, southeast London. Unfortunately, Marie soon realised that this promised inheritance that Frederick claimed he would be getting was all a lie. She was not happy. Soon a new arrangement, shall we say, was in place. Marie got back in contact with Patrick, and before long they were having an affair. And it seems that Frederick knew about it. In fact, Patrick would often come over to their home for meals. So this arrangement carried on for a couple of years, and Marie and Frederick, they finally decided that this situation kind of needed to end. Sometime in 1849, Marie decided that even if she couldn't have Patrick, she could at least have his money. The couple came up with a plan to murder Patrick and take his vast fortune. In late July, some quicklime was delivered to the Mannings' home. On the 8th of August 1849, Marie had asked Patrick to come over for dinner. Marie and Frederick had planned to kill him that night, but their plan was scuppered when Patrick brought along a friend of his, so nothing could be done that night. Marie invited Patrick back for dinner the following night, but insisted that he come alone so they could enjoy some alone time together. So on the 9th of August 1849, Patrick came round once again to Miniver Place to have dinner with the couple. Unfortunately, the dinner was to end in murder before it could even begin. Patrick walked into the kitchen, and before he could realise what was happening, Marie shot him in the back of the head. He fell face first into the grave they had already dug in the kitchen. Somehow the bullet didn't kill Patrick, and he was there in the soil, still alive, in agony and still moving. So Frederick grabbed an iron crowbar and bludgeoned Patrick repeatedly over the head until he was dead. They buried Patrick's body in the grave under the kitchen floor, covered it with quicklime to speed up the decay of the body, and they put the flagstones back in the floor. The next morning, Marie went to Patrick's home in Mile Road in East London. She took hundreds of pounds of cash, gold watches, jewellery, and railway share certificates. The couple were excited about all this wealth that they now had, and things seemed to be going their way. Not for long, though. 3 days later, the Mannings were in a panic. A few of Patrick's colleagues knocked on their door, inquiring after Patrick, as they hadn't seen or heard from him for a few days, and they knew that he dined there with the Mannings on the 9th. Marie tried to stay calm, and she claimed to have not seen him that night, claimed that he hadn't turned up. She knew that while his friends were satisfied with that excuse for now, it wouldn't be long before someone came back to inquire further. The Mannings were flustered and agitated and scared of anyone else coming to the door. They also started to get suspicious of each other. They had to get away from their home. Marie ordered Frederick to sell the furniture, but while he was gone, Marie double-crossed him. She took the bulk of their stolen goods and fled. When Frederick returned home and realised that his wife had gone, he panicked even further. He grabbed the last of the stolen items and ran, catching the boat train to Jersey from Waterloo. Marie had gone to King's Cross Station and from there headed to Edinburgh. The police, in the meantime, had received a report of the missing Patrick. They also had a report about a woman matching Marie's description ransacking Patrick's home, and they headed over to Miniver Place to speak to the Mannings. No one answered, obviously, so the police entered the house and they started looking around. It was empty, completely abandoned. All the furniture had gone, all their belongings had gone. One of the officers then noticed that one of the flagstones in the kitchen still had wet mortar around them. They lifted up the flagstones, and there they discovered the body of Patrick O'Connor. The police now had a murder investigation on their hands. They began asking around, and at King's Cross Station they discovered that she had boarded a train for Edinburgh. They got in touch with Scottish police, who informed them that they already had her in custody due to her arousing suspicions when trying to sell some of Patrick's stolen belongings. Frederick also didn't stay hidden, and a week later he was caught on the island of Jersey. He was asleep in bed, nursing a hangover, when authorities burst into his room. As he was taken in, he told police, quote, "I never liked him, so I battered his head with a ripping chisel." Their trial began on the 25th of October 1849 at the Old Bailey. Back then, trials were usually very quick. usually taking only a couple of hours, but the Manning trials took a full 2 days. The lawyers for each of the couple tried to blame it all on the other one. Marie was accused of greed and killing her lover for his money. Frederick was accused of not being able to handle his wife, sleeping with another man, and acting out of jealousy. It didn't matter though, because both Marie and Frederick were found guilty of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. The morning of Tuesday the 13th of November 1849 was the date of their execution, on the roof of the Horsemonger Lane Jail in Southwark, London. Frederick was so terrified that he had to be helped up the steep flight of stairs, and he ended up collapsing when he reached the gallows. Marie was less emotional. She was a lot calmer and composed, and she dressed in a black satin dress, her face covered in a black veil. It seems that Marie and Frederick made up on the gallows as they stood before the nooses. Marie suddenly leant over and kissed her husband in a show of affection and perhaps forgiveness. They were then executed. Frederick died instantly while Marie writhed around for a few seconds before falling still. Their bodies were left to hang for the customary hour, and then they were taken down and buried in the jail area. The hangman, William Calcraft, he apparently was notorious for his short drop method, in which the condemned were slowly strangled to death. There's actually a science to hanging someone properly. You need to work out the length of the rope needed by using the weight and height of the person. And if it's too long or too short, they end up suffering and taking a while to die, as in the case of Marie. It is very interesting to read about, if very gruesome. So a huge crowd had gathered to watch the execution, between 30 and 50,000 people watching. It was said to be a very raucous crowd, with lots of booing and jeering. One of the people who had witnessed the execution was none other than Charles Dickens. He had watched from a room he had rented overlooking the scene. He wasn't one of those people that enjoyed going to executions though. He was rather disgusted by it all. In a letter written to The Times on the same day, he wrote, quote, "I believe that a sight so inconceivably awful as the wickedness and levity of the immense crowd collected at that execution this morning could be imagined by no man, and could be presented in no heathen land under the sun. Thieves, prostitutes, ruffians and vagabonds of every kind, with every variety of offensive behaviour, fightings, faintings, brutal jokes, demonstrations of indecent delight when swooning women were dragged from the crowd. A man had cause to be ashamed." I didn't know this, but Charles Dickens actually campaigned for an end to public hangings. Perhaps witnessing the Mannings' execution and the large crowd was a part of that, perhaps? We don't really know, but public executions were eventually abolished in 1868. Another interesting fact about Dickens is that he actually based one of his characters in Bleak House on Marie Manning's life. So that is the story of love, greed and murder. It caused an absolute sensation at the time, as evidenced by the huge crowd that came to watch the execution. Also, it was the first time that a husband and wife had been executed together in England since 1700. So thank you for hanging out with me today and spending time watching this. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, the usual routine. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and join me next time for another Cup of Terror.